Hey guys, tonight we begin with the best way to flee while dressed in your favorite chainmail or armor. Because when you're worth more alive than dead, running becomes a survival skill. Welcome to the most cowardly knights in medieval history. We've all grown up with the legend, haven't we? The valiant knight, the gleaming armor, the sacred oath to fight with honor until death. It's the stuff of storybooks, Hollywood blockbusters, and Renaissance fairs where grown adults joust over turkey legs. We want to believe in it, the idea that once upon a time warriors actually lived by a code, that chivalry meant something real, something noble. But here's the truth they don't put on the posters. Medieval knights were professional killers wrapped in expensive metal, and when push came to shove, most of them chose the same thing you or I would choose: survival. The ransom payment. The tactical retreat that looks suspiciously like running away at full gallop. The chivalric ideal. That was marketing. Propaganda for a brutal business where your life was literally worth whatever your family could scrape together to buy you back. Tonight, we're going to shatter that myth. We're going to stand on the battlefield at Poitiers and watch English knights, the supposed victors, literally beat each other bloody over who gets to claim the French king's ransom. We're going to flee alongside Sir John Fastolf, a knight of the Garter, England's highest honour, as he abandons his comrades to slaughter. We're going to count coins with common archers who saw noble knights not as heroes, but as walking lottery tickets worth more than half a year's wages. This isn't a story about honour. It's a story about money, terror, and the enormous gap between the songs they sang in the Great Hall and what actually happened when the arrows started flying. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've won. It's September 19th, 1356. And you're standing in a field outside Poitiers, France, surrounded by the aftermath of what should be the greatest English victory of the 100 Years' War. Your side, the English and their Gascon allies, have just demolished a French army that outnumbered you 3-1. King John II of France himself, the most powerful monarch in Christendom, is your prisoner. This is the stuff of legend. This is what the songs are written about. Knights will be telling their grandchildren about this day. Except something is very, very wrong. You can hear it before you can see it. A commotion near the centre of the English lines, where the King of France is supposed to be surrendering with dignity. But these aren't the sounds of a formal surrender. These are the sounds of a brawl. Metal scraping against metal. The dull thud of armoured fists slamming into armoured bodies. And voices. God. The voices, screaming in both French and English, hoarse with something that isn't battle fury, it's greed. You push through the crowd of soldiers, and the scene that unfolds before you is one that will haunt you for the rest of your life. King John II, anointed by God, the sovereign of France, the man whose ransom will be worth a kingdom, is surrounded by a mob of English and Gascon knights, and they're fighting each other. Not the French, each other. They're literally tearing at one another, trying to claim the king as their personal prisoner, because whoever officially captures him gets the ransom, and John II's ransom. That's not just money, that's generational wealth. That's estates, titles, the kind of fortune that transforms your entire bloodline from minor nobility into lords of significance. A Gascon knight has Jean by one arm, an English knight has the other. They're screaming at each other in languages the other barely understands, but the meaning is crystal clear. Mine. He's mine. I saw him first. Another knight tries to shove his way in, bellowing that he struck the king's horse, that he deserves a share. Fists fly. Someone's visor gets dented. You watch a decorated English knight, a man who probably has a coat of arms and a manor house, and serfs who call him my lord, literally wrestling in the mud with his own allies like a drunk fighting over the last piece of bread at a tavern. This is chivalry. This is the noble warrior code you've been raised to revere. King John II stands in the centre of this scrum, his own armor dented and scratched, his face a mask of royal dignity, trying desperately not to crack into either laughter or tears. He's just been defeated in battle. He's about to spend years in captivity, and instead of being treated like the king he is, he's watching grown men in armor act like children fighting over a toy. The sound is what stays with you. The metallic scrape of gauntlet on breastplate. The hoarse, desperate quality of voices screaming the same thing over and over. He yielded to me. To me. The jingle of coins that aren't even being counted yet, but everyone can already hear them in their imagination. The sound of gold, the sound of power, the sound that drowns out every ballad about honor and glory you've ever heard sung in a castle hall. Your stomach turns. The expensive wine you drank in celebration an hour ago rises in your throat, sour and bitter, because you're realizing something terrible, something that changes everything you thought you knew about knighthood, about war, about the stories that shaped your entire worldview. This isn't about honor. It never was. These men, your heroes, your role models, the warriors whose deeds troubadours turn into poetry, are mercenaries in fancy armor. They didn't come here to defend England or uphold justice or perform brave deeds. They came here for this, for the money, for the chance to catch a prize big enough to change their lives. A senior English commander finally forces his way into the chaos and starts shouting orders, literally pulling knights apart like a father separating brawling sons. It takes threats, promises, and finally the intervention of the Prince of Wales himself to restore order. They eventually agree to share the ransom, to divide it among the key claimants, but the damage is done, not to them, to you, because you've just watched the myth of chivalry die in real time, bleeding out in a French field, while armoured men scream about percentages and payment schedules. The songs lied, the poems lied, the entire culture of knighthood, the oaths, the ceremonies, the sacred vows, it was all a thin veneer over something much more base, much more human, much more honest. Money. That's what this is really about. Money and survival and the brutal mathematics of warfare, where a living prisoner is worth a fortune and a dead hero is worth nothing at all. King John II, to his credit, maintains his composure throughout the entire humiliating spectacle. But you see it in his eyes, a flicker of something like understanding. He knows what you're just learning. He's probably known it his whole life. The songs are beautiful, but the reality is men in expensive armor punching each other in a field, fighting over him like he's a prize pig at a market. Welcome to medieval warfare, where the only thing more valuable than victory is making sure you're the one who gets paid for it. The veteran takes you aside 3 days into your first campaign, and you think he's going to give you advice about keeping your sword sharp or how to sleep in armor. Instead, he teaches you about money. His name is Sir Thomas, and he's fought in France for 15 years. He has scars that cut through his beard, a limp from an old leg wound, and eyes that have seen things you're still naive enough to think are glorious. You're sitting by a campfire, polishing your gear, young and eager and still believing that you're here to serve England, to uphold justice, to prove your worth as a knight. He laughs at you, not cruelly, more like a father laughs at a child who still believes in fairy tales. You think this is about patriotism? He asks, gesturing at the camp around you. You think these men are here for King Edward? For England's honour? You start to protest, but he cuts you off with a wave of his scarred hand. Let me explain the game to you, boy, because if you don't understand it, you'll end up dead or poor or both. Patriotism doesn't fill your purse. Glory doesn't pay your debts. You want to know why these men enlisted? You want to know why I'm still here after 15 years of this hell? He leans in close, and his breath smells like the sour wine they give soldiers, but his words are sharp and clear. Ransom. That's it. That's the whole explanation. One word that unravels everything you thought you understood about medieval warfare. The system works like this. You capture an enemy knight. You don't kill him. God, no. Dead men pay nothing. You take him prisoner. You assess his worth based on his armor, his coat of arms, his title. Then you negotiate a ransom with his family. The amount is usually equivalent to 1 year of his income, but for high-value targets, it can be much, much more. And here's the beautiful part. Sir Thomas explains with a grin that shows 3 missing teeth. Everyone participates. This isn't some secret or shameful thing. It's the entire economic engine of the war. Kings encourage it. The church blesses it. Your commanding officers expect it. It's how common soldiers become wealthy. It's how younger sons of minor nobility become major nobility. It's how wars are funded, how armies are motivated, how men are convinced to march hundreds of miles through foreign territory with disease and death around every corner. You know why men really enlist? Sir Thomas asks. Because of stories like William Callowe. The name means nothing to you yet, but you'll learn it. Everyone learns it eventually. Common archer, nobody special. But in 1415, at Agincourt, you've heard of Agincourt, yes? Callowe captured 1 French knight, just 1, and that single capture earned him £100. You do the math in your head and your eyes widen. A common archer makes 6pence a day. £100 that's 32,000 pence. That's more than 500 days of wages, nearly 2 years of work, for 1 capture. Now multiply that by every knight, every esquire, every man-at-arms on this campaign, Sir Thomas continues. Everyone's playing the same game. Everyone's looking for their prize. You see a French knight on the battlefield, you don't think enemy. You think profit. The campfire crackles, and around you, other soldiers are settling in for the night. But you're not tired anymore. You're doing math. You're recalculating every story you've ever heard about the 100 Years' War. How many of those glorious victories were actually just successful hunting expeditions? How many of those heroic last stands were men refusing to flee because they hadn't captured anyone valuable yet? Sir Thomas pours more wine into his cup. Your cup too, though you barely notice. Here's what they don't tell you in the training yard, he says. The unspoken rule that every veteran knows: capture is always better than kill. A dead Frenchman gets you nothing but tired arms and blood on your sword. A living Frenchman, especially one in good armor, that's a payday. That's your future. That's why you're really here. He's right, and the proof is everywhere once you know to look for it. The way soldiers assess each other's equipment with the eye of merchants at market. The careful, almost tender way wounded prisoners are treated, because damaged goods lose value. The elaborate record-keeping of who captured whom, notarized and witnessed like legal contracts, because of course they are. They're exactly that. A week later, you attend your first feast after a minor skirmish. The English won, that is, several French knights were captured. The mood is celebratory. Knights toast each other with expensive wine looted from a French baggage train. They sing songs about brotherhood and honor. They clasp hands and swear oaths of loyalty. And you watch them, really watch them, and you see the lie. 3 hours ago, one of these same knights abandoned his position to chase down a fleeing French esquire he thought might be worth 50 marks. Another accidentally let a French nobleman escape the main battle so he could capture him privately, avoiding having to share the ransom with others. A third spent the entire skirmish carefully positioning himself to intercept high-value targets, while letting common soldiers deal with the actual fighting. The wine in your mouth tastes like ash. The rich Bordeaux that should taste like victory, like glory, like everything you've dreamed of, it tastes sour and wrong. Because you're toasting brotherhood with men who would sell that brotherhood for the right price. Hell, who have sold it repeatedly and will again tomorrow. Sir Thomas sees your face and laughs again, that knowing, weary laugh. You'll get used to it, he says. Or you won't, and you'll die poor and confused. But either way, welcome to the 100 Years' War. It's not about England versus France. It's about profit versus loss. And the only honor that matters is the honor of getting paid. He raises his cup in a mock toast. To ransom, he says. Around the tent, Other veterans hear him and laugh, raising their own cups. "To ransom," they chorus, and the sound is more sincere than any oath of loyalty you've heard all night. You drink, because what else can you do? The wine still tastes like lies, but Sir Thomas is right about one thing. You'll get used to it. Everyone does. That's the most disturbing part. Your armour is killing you. Not literally, not yet, but it might as well be. 60 pounds of steel strapped to your body, distributed across your frame in a way that's supposed to be ergonomic, but feels like you're wearing a mobile prison. It's October, not even summer, and you're already sweating through your padded gambeson. The moisture has nowhere to go, trapped between cloth and metal, creating a humid microclimate that smells like fear and unwashed wool. Every step sounds like a blacksmith's workshop. Clink, clank, jingle. You couldn't be stealthy if your life depended on it, and sometimes it does. The weight makes you slow. Not immobile, despite what modern people think, but slow enough. Slow enough that a lightly armoured soldier can outrun you. Slow enough that if your horse goes down, you're suddenly vulnerable in ways that turn your stomach. But here's the thing that's slowly dawning on you, the realization that makes the weight feel even heavier. Your expensive armour isn't protection, it's a price tag. Every piece of plate metal, every carefully articulated joint, every polished surface that catches the light, it's all advertising. It's telling every soldier on both sides exactly how much you're worth. A full suit of plate armour costs as much as a small manor. The horse you're riding, another fortune. Your sword, your lance, your decorated shield, each one is a line item in the ransom calculation that everyone around you is constantly, unconsciously performing. You remember William Callowe's story. How could you forget it? Sir Thomas and the other veterans tell it constantly, the way other men tell stories about saints or heroes. Except Callowe isn't a saint. He's a common archer. Was a common archer. Now he's a common archer who made $100 in a single day. The battle was Agincourt, 1415. You weren't born yet, but everyone knows the story. Glorious English victory, rained arrows like judgment from God, the French nobility destroyed. But here's the detail they don't put in the heroic ballads. While the battle was still raging, while men were dying in the mud, William Callowe, an archer making sixpence a day, spotted a French knight trying to retreat. One capture, one lucky, perfectly timed interception of one nobleman in expensive armour. $100. Do the math again, because it never stops being obscene. Sixpence per day means Callowe would have to work for 200 days to earn that much through normal wages. 200 days of waking before dawn, of marching until your feet bleed, of standing watch in the rain, of eating stale bread and drinking water that tastes like the leather flask it's stored in. Or one afternoon, one French night, one ransom payment. The story circulates through every English camp like gospel. Men whisper it to each other with the reverence usually reserved for saints' relics. It's their lottery fantasy, their get-rich-quick dream, their justification for enduring the hell of medieval warfare. And you, standing there in your expensive armour, marked as nobility by every piece of metal you wear, you're not the hero of this story. You're the lottery ticket. The way common soldiers look at you has changed. You noticed it gradually, then all at once. They don't see a leader, or a fellow warrior, or even really a person. They see $100, maybe more, depending on your family's wealth. They calculate your value the way a merchant calculates the value of spices or cloth. Their eyes travel across your armour, assessing quality, estimating resale value, tallying potential profit. During skirmishes, it's even worse. You're supposed to be fighting the French, but you catch English archers, your own side, positioning themselves in ways that make you uncomfortable, not protecting you, herding you, like farmers herding livestock toward market. Because here's the brutal truth that nobody says out loud. It doesn't really matter who captures you. English, French, Gascon, Burgundian, a ransom is a ransom. The papers can be drawn up later, the official story crafted, the appropriate commander given credit. But on the ground, in the chaos of battle, when a common soldier sees a walking pile of money wearing plate armor, allegiance becomes negotiable. You're in camp one evening when you hear it, the sound that encapsulates everything wrong with this system. It's coming from a tent about 30 yards away. The jingle of coins being counted. Not a few coins, a lot of coins. Someone's ransom payment must have just come through, and now it's being distributed among the captors and their commanding officers. The sound is metallic, rhythmic, almost musical. Clink, clink, clink. Each coin hitting the pile with a clear, sharp note. Men are laughing in that tent, celebrating. Someone makes a joke you can't quite hear, and the laughter gets louder. From another direction, much closer, you hear different sounds. The wounded from yesterday's skirmish. They're in the medical tent, such as it is, more like a corner of camp where the severely injured are laid out on canvas and given water while they wait to either recover or die. You can hear them screaming, not the theatrical screaming of battle. This is worse. This is the sound of men with infections, with shattered bones, with wounds that have gone septic. It's the sound of suffering without sufficient medicine or care or even basic comfort. The coins continue jingling, the wounded continue screaming, and somehow the coins are louder. The celebration in that tent will go on for hours. Men who just became wealthy or wealthier will drink and boast and make plans for their new fortune. They'll toast brotherhood and honor. They'll sing songs about courage. And 30 yards away, men will die in agony and nobody will sing about them. Your paranoia is growing. You can't help it. Every time you put on your armor, you feel like you're painting a target on your back. In the training yard, they told you armor would make you safe. Out here, you've learned it makes you a prize to be won. You trust no one, not completely, not the English archers who are supposed to be protecting you, not the knights who swear brotherhood over expensive wine, not even your own squire, who you've caught looking at your armor with that same calculating expression you've seen on everyone else's face. At night, in your tent, you do your own calculations. What would your family pay to get you back? You know the theoretical answer, 1 year of your estate's income. But theory and practice are different things. Would they pay it quickly, or would they negotiate, trying to reduce the price while you rot in a cell somewhere? Would they pay it at all, or would they decide you're not worth bankrupting the family over? These are not theoretical questions. You've heard the stories. Knights abandoned in prisons for years because their families couldn't, or wouldn't pay. Some ransoms took decades to settle. Some never got settled at all. Your expensive armor, your pride, your status symbol, your mark of nobility, has become a liability you can't remove. Taking it off would make you vulnerable in a different way. Wearing it makes you a target. There's no good option, no safe choice, just the constant grinding awareness that to everyone around you, including your own side, you're not a person, you're a price tag in plate mail. And somewhere, another William Callowe is looking at you and dreaming of his $100 payday. The day-to-day reality of campaigning is nothing like the songs promised. It's been 3 weeks since you left the last garrison town, and you've spent exactly 4 hours in actual combat. 4 hours. The rest has been marching, waiting, setting up camp, breaking down camp, setting it up again somewhere else. Your feet hurt, your back hurts. Everything hurts in ways that have nothing to do with glory and everything to do with the simple grinding physics of moving a medieval army across hostile territory. It's boring. That's the secret they never tell you. War is mostly boring, but beneath the boredom, there's a constant calculation happening in your mind. Every skirmish, every encounter, every moment when violence might erupt, you're doing the same mental math everyone else is doing. What are my chances? What's the risk versus the reward? If things go bad, can I get out? Should I get out? You're not alone in this. You've started to notice that everyone is doing the same calculation, all the time. The veterans are just better at hiding it. They've developed a kind of casual vigilance, a way of assessing escape routes while appearing relaxed, of positioning their horses so they can bolt if necessary, while pretending they're just stretching in the saddle. Then you hear about Honoré Bonnet. He's a scholar, a prior, a man who's never worn armor in his life but who has spent years thinking and writing about war. In the 1380s, this was decades ago now, but his work still circulates, he wrote a treatise called The Tree of Battles. It's supposed to be about the laws and customs of warfare, the proper conduct of knights, the theoretical framework for honorable combat. But buried in all that theory is one question that makes your blood run cold, because it's the question you've been asking yourself every single day, but have been too afraid to say out loud. Is it better to flee and live, or die for honor? Just seeing it written down, acknowledged as a real dilemma that real knights face, makes something loosen in your chest. You're not crazy. You're not uniquely cowardly. This is a thing. This is a choice that medieval warriors actually confront, so commonly that scholars are writing treatises about it. Bonnet's answer is even more shocking than the question. To live is more agreeable and pleasant than to die. Read that again. A medieval scholar, a man of God, writing in the 1380s, when chivalric culture is at its theoretical height, just came out and said, yes, fleeing to save your life is reasonable. Living is better than dying. It's more agreeable and pleasant. He's not condemning it as shameful or wicked. He's stating it as a simple fact of human nature. Of course, there's a counter-argument. There always is. Other scholars, other voices, insisting that fleeing is dishonorable and wicked, that a true knight stands his ground, that death with honor is preferable to life with shame. But here's what strikes you. The fact that this is even being debated in scholarly treatises, in formal writing, in documents that will survive for centuries, proves that this isn't a rare dilemma. This is constant. This is the choice that defines medieval combat. Every single battle. You watch it happen in real time during a skirmish the following week. Nothing major, a probe of French positions near a river crossing, but you're positioned next to an older knight, Sir Richard, who has at least a decade of experience. You see him assessing the situation as it develops. The French have more men than expected. The ground is worse than your scouts reported. Your own forces are spread too thin. You watch Sir Richard's face. He's not panicking. He's calculating. His eyes flick to the escape routes, a gap in the French line to the east, the woods to the north, the ford behind you. His hand rests on his horse's neck, ready to turn. He's already decided that if things deteriorate past a certain point, he's gone. And the thing is, you don't blame him. You're doing the exact same calculation. If the French commit their reserve, if your flank collapses, if your commander gives the signal to retreat, or more likely if he doesn't give the signal but should have, what do? Die for honor? Or flee and live? The skirmish doesn't develop into anything serious. The French pull back, testing your resolve but not committing to a full engagement. But that night, around the campfire, nobody talks about what almost happened. Nobody mentions the calculations, the escape routes, the moment when every knight there was prepared to run. Instead, you sing songs. The old ones, the ones about Roland at Roncesvalles Pass, about Arthur's knights, about heroes who stood and fought to their last breath. The songs are beautiful, the melodies are haunting, the lyrics speak of brotherhood and courage and honor that transcends death, and the entire time you're singing, you're aware of the cognitive dissonance. These same men who are now belting out verses about dying gloriously were, 3 hours ago, carefully planning their escape routes, including you. You were doing it too. The wine helps. It always helps. It smooths over the contradiction, makes it possible to hold both truths in your mind simultaneously. Yes, I would flee to save my life. And yes, I believe in honor and courage and standing your ground. Honoré Bonnet understood this. That's why he wrote about it. Because medieval warfare isn't a simple binary between cowards and heroes. It's thousands of men every day asking themselves the same impossible question. Do I stay or do I go? Do I risk death for honor or choose life over glory? And the answer isn't consistent. It can't be. It depends on 100 factors: the tactical situation, your own health, whether you've captured anyone valuable yet, how much you trust your commander, whether your horse is fresh, whether you have children at home who need a father more than they need a dead hero. Some days you'd stay and fight. Some days you'd run. The honesty of that thought terrifies you, but it also relieves you, because you're starting to understand that the knights in the songs, the ones who never waver, who never calculate, who charge into certain death with smiles on their faces, those knights are fiction. The real knights are sitting around this campfire, singing about heroes while privately planning their exits. The real knights are doing what Honoré Bonnet said was agreeable and pleasant, choosing life when they can, accepting death when they must, and living with the uncomfortable gap between what they're supposed to be and what they actually are. You take another drink of wine. Someone starts another song, this one about a knight who single-handedly held a bridge against 100 enemies. It's a great song. The melody is stirring. The lyrics speak to something deep in the human desire for meaning and glory. And tomorrow, when the fighting starts again, you'll do your calculations just like everyone else. Because Honoré Bonnet was right about one thing: living is more agreeable and pleasant than dying, even if admitting that makes you feel like a coward. June 18th, 1429, the Battle of Patay. And you're about to learn what happens when theory becomes reality. You're riding with the English rearguard, and next to you is Sir John Fastolf. You know who he is. Everyone does. Knight of the Garter, England's highest honour. The blue Garter band with gold lettering, personally bestowed by the king, marking him as one of the elite 26 knights in the entire kingdom. If there's anyone who embodies the chivalric ideal, anyone who should stand and fight when honour demands it, it's him. The day has gone wrong from the start. The French have a new energy, a new confidence, ever since that peasant girl, Jeanne, they call her, started riding with their army. Your commanders dismissed her as superstition, a morale trick, nothing that would change the fundamental realities of warfare. But you can feel the difference. The French aren't fighting like they used to. They're not cautious. They're not calculating. They're hunting. Your position was supposed to be defensive, carefully chosen terrain where English archers could do what they do best, turn French cavalry charges into suicide runs. But the French scouts found you before you were ready, and now they're coming, fast, and your forces aren't in position, and the calculation that every veteran is doing simultaneously is coming up with the same answer. This is bad. You can feel it in your horse before you consciously understand it yourself. The animal's muscles are trembling beneath you. Its nostrils are flaring with each breath. Horses know. They sense the panic in their riders, the scent of blood on the wind, the chaos of an army that's about to break. Your mount wants to run. Its entire body is coiled, ready to bolt at the slightest excuse. And God help you, so are you. The smell hits you, horse sweat mixed with your own fear. It's acrid and sharp, coating the back of your throat. And there's something else, a taste in your mouth that you've learned to recognize. Copper. The taste of adrenaline and terror, the body's way of preparing for violence or flight. And right now, it's screaming for flight. You look around. The English line is collapsing, not in an organized retreat that might be salvageable, but in the early stages of a rout. Men are looking at each other with wide eyes, seeking permission or leadership, or just confirmation that everyone else is thinking what they're thinking. Sir John Fastolf is doing his own assessment. You see it in his posture, the way he's scanning the field with the practiced eye of a veteran who has survived dozens of battles. He's reading the signs, the French numbers, the momentum, the positioning, the morale of the English forces around him. He's doing the calculation, and then, in one fluid motion, he makes his decision. Fastolf turns his horse, not toward the French, away from them, toward the rear, toward safety, toward survival. And he doesn't just turn, he gallops, full speed, no hesitation, no looking back. One moment he's there, England's elite, a knight of the Garter, a decorated veteran, a symbol of everything chivalry is supposed to represent. The next moment he's gone, his horse's hooves kicking up mud as he flees the battlefield at full speed. The silence that follows is worse than any sound of battle. It's not literally silent. There's still shouting, the clash of weapons, the thunder of hooves. But in the space where Fastolf was, in the gap his departure created, there's a silence that fills your ears like water, drowning out everything else. Because if he can run, if a knight of the Garter, one of England's finest, can make that choice, what does that say about the rest of you? What does that say about honour? You look around at the other knights, and you see the same realization hitting them. Some of them knew Fastolf personally, rode with him on previous campaigns, drank with him, swore oaths of brotherhood with him. And he just left. Didn't warn anyone. Didn't try to organize a fighting retreat. Didn't attempt to rally the troops, or make a heroic last stand, or do any of the things the songs say you're supposed to do. He just left. And now you're here, and the French are coming, and the man who was supposed to be. Your example of how a true knight behaves has demonstrated that when survival is on the line, honour is negotiable. Your horse is dancing beneath you, trying to turn, trying to follow Fastolf's lead. The animal's panic is feeding yours, or maybe it's the other way around. You can't tell anymore where the horse's fear ends and yours begins. You're both creatures that want desperately to run, and the only thing keeping you from running is the thin, fraying thread of shame. But Fastolf had no shame. Or rather, he decided that shame was preferable to death. And he's a knight of the Garter. He's killed men. He's been decorated. He's dined with kings. If he can make that choice, what right do you have to judge him? What right do you have to stay? The French hit your position like a wave. The fighting is brief and brutal. The English forces, already demoralized by Fastolf's departure, barely put up a fight. Some surrender immediately. Some try to flee and are cut down. A few, a very few, stand and fight and die for their efforts, and you'll never know if they were brave or just too shocked to run. You survive. You won't detail how. The memory is confused, adrenaline-soaked, full of moments you're not proud of, but you survive. And in the days that follow, as the English regroup and count their losses, one name is on everyone's lips: Fastolf. Not as a villain, not yet. That comes later. Right now, there's just confusion, disbelief, the cognitive dissonance of trying to reconcile the man's reputation with what everyone saw him do. He fled, a knight of the Garter, one of England's finest. He chose life over honour, and somehow that choice feels more world-shattering than the battle itself. The summons comes months after Patay, but everyone knew it was coming. Sir John Fastolf is called before his peers to answer for his actions. Not in a formal court, this isn't a trial in the legal sense, but in the court of chivalric opinion, which is somehow worse. A judge can sentence you to death. Your fellow knights can sentence you to something more permanent: dishonour. You're not present for the hearing, but the accounts spread through every English garrison and camp like wildfire. Everyone wants to know, what does a knight of the Garter say when accused of cowardice? How do you defend the indefensible? The chief accuser is John Talbot, Earl of Shrewsbury, a man whose reputation for aggression and courage borders on suicidal. Talbot is everything a medieval knight is supposed to be: fearless to the point of recklessness, always first into battle, the kind of man who sees retreat as a personal insult. He's also, notably, a man who has been captured multiple times and ransomed back, which tells you something about the effectiveness of his strategy, but that's beside the point. Talbot's accusation is simple and devastating: cowardice. The worst charge that can be levelled against a knight. Not theft, not murder, not even treason. Cowardice. The one sin that undermines everything the system is built on. And Fastolf's defence: I use tactical good sense. That's it. That's his argument. The battle was lost. The position was untenable. Staying would have meant death or capture with no strategic benefit. Retreating preserved fighting men for future engagements. It was the smart choice, the rational choice, the choice any competent military commander would make. He's not wrong. That's the infuriating part. By any objective military standard, Fastolf made the correct decision. Patay was lost before he fled. The English were outnumbered, outpositioned, and outmaneuvered. Staying and fighting would have changed nothing except adding his name to the casualty list. Or worse, his ransom to French coffers. A modern general would be praised for this, preserving forces, avoiding unnecessary casualties, living to fight another day. These are sound military principles, but this isn't a modern army. This is the world of chivalry, where pragmatism is a dirty word and tactical retreat sounds suspiciously like cowardice with better vocabulary. You hear the details from a knight who was present at the hearing. The atmosphere in that room was ice. Fastolf stood before men he'd fought beside, men he'd considered brothers, and watched their faces turn to stone as he explained his reasoning. The battle was lost, he said. My presence would not have changed the outcome. True. Staying would have meant capture or death. Also true. I preserve myself and my men for future service to England. Strategically sound. And yet, with every word, he's digging himself deeper. Because he's defending himself with logic, and the accusation isn't logical, it's moral. He's being accused of violating a code, and he's responding with a spreadsheet. The other knights in the room hear his defense, and what they're really hearing is, I calculated the odds and decided my life was worth more than my honor, which, to be absolutely clear, is what every knight does every day. It's the calculation you've been watching yourself and others perform constantly. But you're not supposed to say it out loud. You're not supposed to articulate the math. You're supposed to pretend the code is real, that honor is absolute, that you'd never make the same choice Fastolf made. Even though you would. Even though most of them would. Even though Honoré Bonnet wrote an entire treatise acknowledging that fleeing is sometimes the rational choice. The hypocrisy is suffocating. Fastolf, to his credit or his damnation, doubles down. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't beg for understanding. He stands by his decision with the cold logic of a man who knows he's right and doesn't understand why that's not enough. Would you have me throw my life away for nothing? He asks the room. And there it is. The question that exposes the entire rotten foundation of chivalric culture. Because the honest answer, the answer every man in that room knows but can't say, is yes. Yes. We would have you throw your life away for nothing. That's what honor requires. That's what the code demands. Die for nothing. Die for the appearance of courage. Die so the rest of us can maintain the fiction that this system means something. But Fastolf says it. He makes the unspeakable thought spoken. And for that, more than for the fleeing itself, he can never be forgiven. The hearing ends without a formal verdict. That will come later. But the damage is done. You hear it in how the other knights talk about him. The contempt, the disgust. But underneath that, barely concealed, is something else. Fear. Because Fastolf proved something they all desperately need to not be true. He proved that the code is optional. That honor is a choice. That when it really matters, when death is staring you in the face, even the best of them, even a knight of the Garter, will choose survival. And if Fastolf can do it, so can anyone. You find yourself thinking about his defense at odd moments. During long marches, during watches, during the quiet hours before dawn, when you're alone with your thoughts. I use tactical good sense. It plays in your mind like a refrain. Was he a coward, or was he the only honest man in the room? You don't know. You genuinely don't know. And that uncertainty gnaws at you, because if you can't answer that question about Fastolf, how can you answer it about yourself? What would you have done at Patay? You want to believe you'd have stayed, that you'd have fought, that honor would have overridden survival instinct. But Fastolf probably believed that about himself too, once, before he was actually there, before he smelled the horse sweat and fear, before he tasted copper in his mouth, before his horse trembled beneath him, and every instinct screamed to run. The record of the hearing notes, almost as an afterthought, Fastolf's final statement. It's brief, and it will haunt you. This is the greatest charge that can be said of a knight. He knows. He understands exactly what he's accused of. This isn't a man in denial. This is a man who made a choice with his eyes open, who weighed honor against survival and chose survival, and who now has to live with the consequences. And the consequences are just beginning. The Duke of Bedford makes it official. John Fastolf, Knight of the Garter, one of the 26 most honoured warriors in England, is stripped of his garter. The physical act is as symbolic as it is humiliating. The blue ribbon with its gold motto, Honi soit qui mal y pense, shame on him who thinks evil of it, is literally removed. The irony of that motto in this context would be funny if it weren't so devastating. You're not present for the ceremony, if you can even call it that, but you hear about it in excruciating detail. These things spread. They have to spread. That's the point. Public shame only works if it's public. The Garter isn't just a piece of cloth. It's membership in the most exclusive military brotherhood in England. It's recognition by the king himself. It's a mark that says, this man embodies everything we value. Courage, loyalty, honor. Removing it isn't just punishment. It's erasure. You're being unmade from the elite. Bedford doesn't do this lightly. He can't. Stripping a Knight of the Garter is an extraordinary action, reserved for the most serious offences: treason, cowardice, the kinds of sins that undermine the entire system. By taking this step, Bedford is sending a message to every knight in England. There are limits, there are lines, and Fastolf crossed them. But here's what makes this complicated, what makes it more than just a simple morality play. Fastolf wasn't a bad knight. Before Patay, his record was exemplary. Decades of service, successful campaigns, multiple victories. He was exactly the kind of warrior the Order of the Garter was designed to honour. Which means his fall proves something terrifying. It can happen to anyone. One bad decision, one moment of choosing survival over honour, one calculation gone wrong. That's all it takes to destroy a lifetime of service. Your entire reputation, everything you've built, every oath you've sworn, it can all collapse in the time it takes to turn your horse around. Fastolf doesn't accept this quietly. He fights back. For years. He petitions. He writes letters. He appeals to anyone who will listen. His argument remains consistent. He made the militarily correct decision. Patay was lost. Staying would have achieved nothing except adding another English casualty to a battle already decided. And he's right. Even his detractors, if pressed privately, would probably admit he's right. But that's not the point. It's never been the point. The system doesn't care about being right. It cares about maintaining the fiction that honour matters more than survival. If knights can start making tactically sound decisions to flee whenever battles look bad, the whole structure collapses. Who commands the rearguard? Who holds the line? Who sacrifices themselves so others can retreat in order? Honour, or at least the performance of honour, is load-bearing. Remove it, and the entire edifice of medieval warfare falls apart. Fastolf eventually succeeds in getting himself reinstated. It takes years of effort, political manoeuvring, and probably significant sums of money. The Garter is restored. On paper, his honour is recovered. But it doesn't matter. The stain never washes out. In every hall, in every camp, when his name comes up, there's a pause. A knowing look. The unspoken understanding, oh Fastolf, the one who ran at Patay. Everyone knows. Everyone will always know. And then, decades later, William Shakespeare writes a play. Henry IV and Henry V, the great dramas of English military glory. And in those plays appears a character named Falstaff, note the spelling, a cowardly comic figure who talks big about honour but runs from every fight. A fat, drunken buffoon who embodies the opposite of chivalric virtue. The inspiration is obvious. The name is too close to be coincidence. Shakespeare took Sir John Fastolf, Knight of the Garter, decorated veteran, and transformed him into literature's most famous coward. This is immortality, but not the kind anyone wants. Fastolf's actual military record, his victories, his years of service, his strategic competence, all of it is forgotten. What survives is Falstaff the coward, the man who fled, the cautionary tale about what happens when you choose survival over honor. You think about this sometimes, during the long stretches between battles. The stories that survive aren't the true ones. They're the useful ones. Fastolf's pragmatism, his military logic, his perfectly rational decision to preserve fighting men for future battles, none of that makes for good propaganda. But a coward? A Knight of the Garter who turned tail and ran? That's a story you can use. That's a warning you can tell young knights. This is what happens when you break the code. There's another detail that haunts you, though you heard it third hand. Fastolf's experience in captivity from earlier in his career. Before Patay, he'd been captured and ransomed at least once. He knew what that was like. The ransom cell, cold, damp stone, thin straw that does nothing against the chill, the sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. He knew what it was like to be a commodity, to have a price attached to your life, to wait while messengers rode back and forth, negotiating your value like you were livestock. He knew the humiliation of hearing your captors laugh while they drafted the ransom letter, making jokes about how much your family would pay, whether they'd try to negotiate down, whether you were worth the trouble. Maybe that's why he ran at Patay. Not cowardice, but knowledge. He'd been through the system. He knew what capture meant. Not just death, but worse. Months or years in a cell, your family bankrupting themselves to buy you back. The shame of being reduced to a transaction. Or maybe that's too generous. Maybe he just got scared, made a bad calculation, and spent the rest of his life paying for one moment of weakness. You'll never know. Nobody will. But his name, twisted into Falstaff, transformed into comedy, will outlive everyone who actually fought at Patay. The lesson lands like a hammer. In medieval warfare, being remembered as brave matters more than being alive, more than being right, more than being smart. The songs don't celebrate the survivors. They celebrate the dead heroes. And Fastolf committed the unforgivable sin. He survived with his honesty intact. Step back from the individual stories for a moment. Pull your perspective up from the mud and blood of Patay, from the brawl over King John Fastolf at Poitiers, from Fastolf's humiliation and Callowe's fortune. Look at the whole system with clear eyes, and you'll see something remarkable. The people at the top understood the game perfectly. French King Charles V, Charles the Wise they called him, reconquered most of France from English control between 1364 and 1380. 16 years of successful military campaigning that restored French power and reversed decades of English gains. And he did it, according to contemporary accounts, without moving from his throne. Think about that. A king praised not for his courage in battle, but for his strategic brilliance in avoiding battle. Charles V understood what Fastolf understood, what every pragmatic commander knew but couldn't say. Battles are expensive, risky, and unnecessary if you have other options. Charles used economics, diplomacy, siegecraft, and attrition. He hired professional commanders who understood that preserving forces mattered more than glorious charges. He avoided set-piece battles where luck and chaos could destroy an army in an afternoon. He won through patience, not heroism, and his contemporaries celebrated him for it. The same culture that destroyed Fastolf's reputation praised Charles V for doing essentially the same thing, choosing strategy over glory, calculation over courage, victory over the appearance of honor. The difference? Charles was a king. Kings are allowed to retreat. Kings are supposed to avoid unnecessary risk. Losing a battle is regrettable. Losing the king is catastrophic. The ransom for King John II after Poitiers was 3 million gold crowns, enough to bankrupt France and fund English wars for decades. Everyone agreed, kings should not be risked in battle if it can be avoided. which means the system always understood that survival sometimes matters more than honor. It's just that this understanding was hierarchical. Kings could calculate, great lords could exercise caution, but common knights, you were expected to die for the code, even when everyone above you was busy being pragmatic. Look at the Italian condottieri, the professional mercenary commanders who dominated Italian warfare during the same period. These were men who made warfare their business, literally. They commanded armies for pay, captured cities for contracts, and switched sides when the money was better. Niccolò Machiavelli, writing about them later, called them cowards. He complained that battles between condottieri armies were bloodless affairs where everyone maneuvered for advantage, but nobody actually committed to fighting. Professional soldiers, Machiavelli sneered, were too invested in survival to be properly heroic. He meant it as an insult. But read it another way. Professional soldiers, freed from the chivalric code, immediately recognized that avoiding battle was smarter than seeking it. They understood warfare as economics, not theatre. Which means the cowardice that Fastolf was punished for, the pragmatism that Charles V was praised for, it was always the rational response. The chivalric code was the aberration, the cultural artifact that made men do irrational things for the sake of appearances. You return to Poitiers, in your mind. September 19th, 1356. The scene that started this whole journey. King John II, surrounded by English and Gascon knights literally fighting each other, tearing at armour, screaming in two languages, all desperate to claim the ransom prize. And now you see it differently. Not as a betrayal of chivalry, but as the truth of what chivalry always was. The sensory details flood back, but now they tell a complete story. The sound of armoured knights screaming in French and English. That's the sound of the real economy of war. The brutal market where human lives have price tags. The weight and heat of your armour, 60 pounds of steel that marks you as valuable, transforms you from person to commodity, makes you both hunter and hunted. The smell of horse sweat mixed with fear, the honest terror that every warrior feels, but the code forbids them from acknowledging. The cold humiliation of the ransom cell, the logical endpoint of a system built on capture rather than kill, where your worth is calculated in gold crowns while you rot in the dark. The silence after Fastolf flees, the moment when the fiction breaks and everyone sees the truth they've been avoiding. The jingle of coins being counted, louder than victory hymns, more celebrated than courage, the real reason men came to war. The taste of expensive wine turning to ash, the physical sensation of recognizing hypocrisy, of watching men toast honor they don't believe in, the feeling of your horse's panic beneath you, the shared cowardice of animal and rider, the most honest relationship on any battlefield. Weave them together, and what do you have? Not a story about heroes and cowards. A story about a system that demanded superhuman courage while running on very human greed. A system that celebrated honor while rewarding calculation. A system that punished Fastolf for honesty while praising Charles V for the same pragmatism. Chivalry was always propaganda. Not because medieval people were particularly cynical, though many of them were, but because warfare required it. You need soldiers to stand their ground. You need knights to hold positions. You need someone to fight the rearguard action while everyone else retreats. And you can't do that if you're honest about the economics. So you create a code. You write songs about heroes who never waver. You establish orders of knighthood that reward courage. You shame men like Fastolf who break character and speak the truth. You maintain the fiction because the fiction is load-bearing. The songs and poems weren't celebrations. They were recruitment tools. Military propaganda for a brutal business that required men to do irrational things for rational purposes. And the cowards, Fastolf and everyone like him who chose survival over honor, who used tactical good sense instead of dying gloriously. Maybe they were just the honest ones. The ones who refused to pretend the code was real. The ones who looked at the economics of warfare and made the same calculation that kings and professional soldiers were making. Living is more agreeable and pleasant than dying. We romanticize medieval warfare because we're centuries removed from it. We see the castles and the heraldry and the formal tournaments, and we imagine a world of honor and glory. But the people who actually lived it, who wore the armor, who fought the battles, who made the terrible choice between courage and survival, they knew it was a lie. They sang the songs because they had to. They toasted brotherhood because that's what the code demanded. But when the arrows started flying and the French cavalry charged and the battle turned against them, they did the math. They calculated their odds. They planned their escapes, just like you would, just like anyone would. The only difference between Fastolf and the heroes is that Fastolf got caught. His moment of honest calculation happened at the wrong place, at the wrong time, with too many witnesses, so he became the cautionary tale, the example, the name that Shakespeare twisted into comedy. But how many other knights made the same choice and were lucky enough to have no one notice? How many tactical retreats were just cowardice with better timing? How many heroes died not from courage, but from bad luck, or poor horsemanship, or the simple inability to run fast enough? We'll never know. History remembers what's useful, not what's true. And the useful story is that chivalry was real, that honor mattered, that medieval knights were somehow nobler than the rest of us. We need that story. We need to believe that once upon a time, people lived by codes that transcended self-interest. But they didn't. They were just people, as afraid and pragmatic and contradictory as we are. They wanted to survive. They wanted to get paid. They wanted to go home to their families. The honest ones admitted it. The successful ones hid it. And the system celebrated the liars while punishing the truth-tellers, because that's how propaganda works. Welcome to medieval warfare. Where the songs were beautiful, the reality was brutal, and the cowards might have been the only sane people on the battlefield.